Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone, and I'm thankful to be able to kick this session off this afternoon by sharing with you a presentation about Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, and how we can be your partner in conservation. Seems like I'm having trouble sharing without that. Okay, so let's get started. First, I'd like to discuss with you who is NRCS? What is NRCS? NRCS is a Natural Resources Conservation Service, and it's an agency of the United States Department of Agriculture. NRCS was established in 1935 as the Soil Erosion Service, and it has been formerly known as the Soil Conservation Service. And it was created as a result of the Dust Bowl. In fact, you can see a picture here shows a little bit of the wind erosion. In fact, Hugh Hammond Bennett, the founder of NRCS, was testifying before Congress, and you know, he was a pretty sharp fella. He made sure that one of the big dust storms was going to be blowing across Washington D.C. when he made his pitch to Congress to create the Soil Conservation Service. And so, as he was speaking, the windows just turned black. You couldn't see anything, and because of that, and that kind of that showmanship there, but he was addressing a serious issue with wind erosion out west. That was what led to the creation and establishment of the Soil Conservation Service. So, picture that you see there is a real part of our history. So what is NRCS mission? Our mission is to deliver conservation solutions so that agricultural producers can protect natural resources. That's our primary goal. Now, what does that result in? That results in farmers' ability to feed a growing world. Excuse me. Now, NRCS is not a regulatory agency. Everything you do with NRCS is voluntary. And just to assure you, NRCS is science-based. All of the activities that we recommend and discuss with you have a basis, have a foundation in science and in research in the field. So that's an important thing to kind of build trust between our producers and our personnel. This is not just the seat of your pants or anything like that. This is science-based. So we provide assistance to land users to protect their natural resources. What are those? Soil, water, air, plants, and animals. And you know, for many years, folks have heard our motto, which is NRCS helps people help the land. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I think you may have gotten muted with letting people in from the waiting room or something.
Okay. So let's continue. NRCS at the local level partners with soil and water conservation districts. At the state level, and this is specific to Kentucky, but it'll be very similar in all the other states. At the state level, we work with the Kentucky Division of Conservation. And then in addition to those groups, we get assistance from Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, Kentucky Division of Forestry, the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and that's not all. We also work with many other partner entities. For example, a little later, Mitch Hunter is going to be discussing how some of our easement programs partner with other agencies, and groups. So we partner with a lot of different folks so that we can deliver conservation to agricultural producers. All right, now, how can NRCS partner with you? What can we do to help you? First, we provide technical assistance. Second, we provide financial assistance. Technical assistance is developing conservation plans. That's a question we asked earlier. Have you worked with NRCS to develop a conservation plan? A conservation plan is a tool designed to help you better manage the natural resources on your farm. We have access to all different kind of agricultural professionals and technical individuals who can provide valuable resources to that local planner who you would work with so that they can provide a plan that will fit your operation. So a conservation plan, for those of you who might not have one, that's aerial photography of your property, soils maps. You'd list all the different management decisions you were making right now. And then it would also have locations and schedules for new activities that you might want to include in your operation. And then that would include the operation and maintenance schedule for those activities. All right. Then, in addition to technical assistance, we also offer financial assistance. Financial assistance is where we're able to provide financial incentives for users to implement the conservation practices that we recommend. Those practices have to address a resource concern, and they have to be involved on eligible land. Eligible land is agricultural and non-industrial private forest land. And then we're also including now some urban properties in our eligible land designations. So financial assistance starts with a visit to Farm Service Agency. That's our sister agency with USDA. You have to provide them with some information showing that you have a tax ID number, that you have control of the land that you want to include in a contract, that you're compliant with some of the provisions of the Food Security Act. And then there's also an adjusted gross income provision where individuals have to make less than $900,000 annually adjusted gross income in order to be able to participate in our programs. Now, also, we give special consideration to folks who are in historically underserved categories. Folks in these categories can compete in smaller groups for funding. They can, in some instances, be considered for higher rates of funding, and they might be able to receive advance payments to help them get started on some of their activities. Now, historically underserved individuals can be part of three categories. First is beginning farmers, and that probably, from what I saw, catches a lot of folks in this conversation today. That is folks who've been farming for 10 years or less. It includes limited resource producers. That's folks whose income doesn't exceed a specified amount for their county. And then socially disadvantaged individuals, which includes certain racial and ethnic groups. So those are the historically underserved categories, and those are folks that we target to try to help get contracts at this time. Excuse me. Now, I'm not going to read through all these resource concerns, but we have an array of resource concerns that we can help you address, from erosion-related issues, runoff-related issues, source water depletion if you irrigate, how to handle pollutants and store those. New to us is weather resilience, air quality, degraded plant condition, how to manage fire, and just an array of other issues that we can help you address with a conservation plan, and if you're able to get a contract with us, with financial assistance. All right, now, financial assistance, first off, you need to know the funding is extremely competitive. Many applications go unfunded every year. Applications that are not selected in one year, though, can be rolled over to a following year so that you can continue to compete. I want to let you know one thing about our financial assistance. We have funding that goes directly to organic individuals or individuals with organic operations. In conservation stewardship that I'm going to discuss, we have funding that we have to use it or lose it every year. In EQIP, that's another program I'm going to talk about in a minute, we were able to fund every organic application last year. So if you do have an organic operation, or if you are interested in it, that's something to consider that we may be able to help you with dealing with conservation concerns. All right, the two largest financial assistance programs offered by NRCS I mentioned EQIP, it's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and CSP, Conservation Stewardship. All right. I'm going to briefly go through these. I'm not going to hit on every point, but I want you to understand this. EQIP provides financial assistance to implement conservation practices to address specific resource concerns. Let me explain that really quickly. If you have a spot in a field that erodes, we will help you address that erosion on that spot in that field. If you have some type of pest pressure in a location on your farm, we will help you with that pest pressure in that location on that farm. They're almost like point to address point types of practices, okay, typically. Now, we do offer things such as cover crops and things like that, but a lot of times EQIP is to address a very specific item and concern that you have. Now, what type of land can we help you with? Well, pasture land, crop land, forest land. We have accounts for various watersheds that we try to provide additional help for certain watersheds to improve water quality. Organic, we have we offer high tunnels, which some folks are familiar with. Many other things we offer there. Again, those payments are for specific items that are addressed and that they will be checked out by our local NRCS personnel, and they will help you with those. All right. Our common EQIP practices, fencing, livestock water, those types of things, pasture and hay planting. We also provide help in forests with forest management and wildlife habitat and some erosion issues as well. Now let's move on to CSP. I don't have much time left. I really need to get moving. CSP is a program that encourages producers to address resource concerns in a comprehensive manner. So remember I said EQIP, we want you to address specific items. In CSP, we're asking you to maintain and manage the conservation on that you currently have on your operation, and then to incorporate new additional conservation activities across your entire operation to benefit a whole wide variety of different concerns. So let's move down here to show you some examples. All right, conservation stewardship program pays you a per acre land use payment. It also pays you for addressing resource concerns. And then finally, it pays you some financial assistance for implementing conservation activities. Some of the activities are crop related. You can see here cover crops, improving fertilized practices, improving your crop rotations. For hay folks, forage plantings and improving your grass-based grazing systems. For forestry folks, brush management, and then a lot of different wildlife activities that, for example, help bats, help pollinators, help beneficial insects, things that protect wildlife as you harvest, and things that improve wildlife habitat. So that's some of the activities for CSP. Now, this is what I really wanted to get to, an example of a CSP contract. All right, let's talk about this. So if your farm has some cropland, you might put some cover crop to suppress weed pressure. You might manage your forage harvest to maintain wildlife habitat. If on your pasture land, you might manage your grazing and improve food, cover, and shelter for wildlife with your grazing management. And then on the farmstead, which would be the barns and homestead kind of area, you might plant some pollinator habitat. This would be all in one contract. So we're trying to kind of have a holistic contract that addresses all your different land uses to help you to have an operation that's more environmentally friendly and that is more conservation concerned. All right, now, I want to briefly just mention two programs that we have that are easement programs. Now in a little bit, Mitch is going to talk about some easement programs. So this dovetails right into it. Our agricultural conservation easements have two components: wetland easements and agricultural easements. Wetland easements are wetland reserve easements program. And this program removes wetlands from agricultural production. It's primarily focused on placing a perpetual easement on a wetland and then restoring the wetland functions and hydrology to that land. So this is a program that takes land out of production and gets it back into the wetland situation that historically it would have been in. And then finally, agricultural land easements. And these easements are working land easements. You continue to farm the land, you continue to have agricultural activities on that land, and NRCS works with a partner entity, which Mitch is going to talk about, who would purchase and hold the easement, and we help them do that. So we partner with an entity to help them keep agricultural lands in agriculture. All right, for Kentucky folks, this is a quick map. This shows you that our state is divided into three geographical areas. Now, west, central, and east. But what's important for you to know is that NRCS services all 120 counties in the state. And there are 38 specific NRCS service centers where we have folks who will work with you. If you'd like to get online and see those service centers, I have a link here in just a moment. And you can get assistance. NRCS programs are voluntary, but you have to follow rules. The practices implemented have to meet our standards and specifications. Our funding is competitive, and there is a cost share component to our financial assistance, meaning it will cost you something out of your pocket to participate. We don't charge you, but we don't provide 100% of the funding for the activities. And finally, while NRCS works to address resource concerns across the landscape, our real priority is our customers. NRCS only succeeds when our customers successfully implement conservation activities that we plan, and when those activities successfully address the needs of our customers and their land. You can see that there's steps to obtaining assistance, and then this is just some information where our field officers are located. You can take a look at this later and get more information about NRCS. Thank you. I hope you will choose to participate with NRCS for our programs and activities, and hope that you'll get a conservation plan on your farm or on your operation so that you can begin to see these benefits as well. So thank you, and I'll step back for the next participant.
It's really important work that you and NRCS are doing to grow an ag system, not only in Kentucky, but throughout the country with these conservation practices in place and continuing to grow. So thanks for sharing that. Wanted to let everyone know that we will hold all questions, and please put them in the chat when you've got them. If you need any clarification, just drop it in the chat. We'll come back to it later. We'll hold all of them for all three panelists until the end, and then we'll wrap back to the Q&A for all three of them collectively. Shifting gears from our Kentucky NRCS office to the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. Jason Nally was born and raised on a beef, cattle, and tobacco farm in Loretto, Kentucky. He holds a degree in wildlife management from EKU, Eastern Kentucky University, and after completing an internship with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy, Jason traveled around the Commonwealth for 10 years, serving various roles within the USDA Farm Bill program, as an environmental educator, as a professional wildlife biologist, and then as manager of Star Hill Farm. Jason's current role with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife is to coordinate public and private wildlife initiatives across the bluegrass region of central Kentucky. So Jason wants to know a little something, and we're going to put this question in the chat. Have you had a Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife biologist provide guidance on your farm? So anybody out there share that experience with us? And I will hand it over to Mr. Nally.
Yeah, that introduction was something else. I probably wouldn't have put that much in there now. I feel a little bashful. Definitely thank you all for inviting me to participate in this panel. I think one of the last big events that I was with people at was the Oak Conference, and definitely miss seeing each and every one of your all's faces and sharing in all the fun stories of working outside every day. It's definitely a lot to it. So anyways, my slides are really pretty basic. I'm hoping that most of this conversation can be generated in the Q&A section, but you know, I think that for a lot of people, I want to just have this as basically a guide to who the department is and where the contacts are. For a lot of folks, you know, your interaction with the department, hopefully in a good way, has been with one of our law enforcement officers. You know, they're definitely the most visible people in most of your communities, and probably the most important people you all have to call if you have issues with trespassers or people hunting illegally on your property. But there's a lot more to the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. You know, we're really, for as small of an organization as we are, we really have a pretty major impact across the Commonwealth. And, you know, at the end of the day, we are agricultural producers. It just so happens that most of our practices are forest management or pollinator habitats or, you know, things like that. But I mean, we still manage 165,000 acres of property across the Commonwealth. So there's a lot of moving parts. It's definitely farm related, and I definitely pick up a lot of information from growers like yourself. So I'm hoping this can be a tit for tat. There's a lot of things that we are still trying to learn from an organic standpoint, as far as you know, implementing some of these pollinator habitats, some of these native grass restorations, some of those type of things that we know that there's got to be a technique out there that doesn't utilize some of the herbicides, but we just haven't had some of the results that we would like to see. So I work in the wildlife division. We also have a fisheries division, our information and education division, marketing, as well as an engineering, infrastructure, technology, and everyone's favorite, our HR, payroll staff, and administrative services that we all like to avoid except for payday. Probably, you know, from a farm standpoint, most of you probably either have a pond there on site or you live near a water source. You know, a lot of times things will pop up in individuals' ponds and they just are really stumped at what they might need to do to resolve that issue. So whether it be, you know, nutrient management or whether it be fish population management or maybe even, you know, some type of damage issues, we have a really good resource on our website that that kind of lines out some of the basic management techniques utilized on farm ponds. It also provides some information on fish habitats and then some of the fisheries that we have located around the state, as well as stocking information for those locations. If you have a specific question related to your property, what I've kind of done with these slides is you can just hold your phone over that code to the right of the screen, take a snapshot of it, and you're going to have all of these contact information for these folks in your phone ready to rock and roll after this presentation. That way we can go ahead and get the conversation started. So the wildlife side of things, this is where I've been involved in the department for the longest amount of time. I definitely know more about this this side of Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife than any other. So hopefully if you all ask questions, they're really going to be wildlife and habitat focused. That way I still continue to look smart after Jenny's introduction. I started off in an NRCS office. I was one of the private lands biologists that whenever you signed up for a program, I was dispatched out to your property to help develop that management plan, identify any unique resources that you may have there that you didn't even know about, and try to fine tune that to make for the benefit of native flora and fauna. The same is true now. If you reach out to NRCS, more than likely one of our staff members are going to be assisting their staff in the development of your plan in relation to wildlife practices. Now, if it's a high tunnel, obviously we're not going to be there, but you know, if you're looking for pollinator planting, a riparian buffer, if you're looking for some of those type of habitat practices, you're going to get one of us out there on your site. I also have included here on this CURDI code, this is kind of up to date. We definitely have a lot of openings in that department. So check back later if this is not the most accurate information. If you call and you just get no one, then we're currently trying to staff that. Go to the next one in line. Really, this is probably a resource that you all may not be as aware of as the point of contact that you may have with the NRCS office, and that's our regional biology staff. They mainly focus on big landscape level projects that unify watersheds, that work with communities, and really large landowners. But they're also a really important resource for you all to reach out to regarding nuisance wildlife. Being someone who has grown crops for a number of years, this is the saddest thing ever is to watch it all go away in one evening. And our resource folks are there to help you try to come with some solid plans to reduce the amount of nuisance wildlife damage that you see on your property. For a lot of you folks, disease monitoring and some of the work we're doing on that is probably really important. We monitor for new diseases that are showing up every year. Chronic wasting disease was the big one this year, but rabbit hemorrhagic disease is something that we just recently found here in the state. And, all of those diseases that maybe don't have a direct impact to agricultural commodities, I mean, they could. And we are very vigilant in monitoring such things across the state and spend a great deal of our resources doing that. I'm saying that in that if you start seeing sudden die-offs or if you have potential disease related things happening on your property, keep this number handy. It's really beneficial for us to be able to get to your property in a timely fashion to be able to get as good of a sample as we possibly can. That can really help your operation. This is going to become even more and more important as some of these avian type of diseases start to show up around the United States. So it's really good for us to keep a good line of communications with this community. That way we can stay on top of this stuff for everyone's benefit. We also do a lot of population surveys. So for yourself, if you're looking like maybe I don't really know how many deer I have, I know I need to reduce some, but I need to have a goal. We can work with you and to develop a good plan to get the information that you need. Another valuable, indispensable tool, in my opinion, that we can provide guidance on is the use of prescribed fire on your property. We use it a lot in woodland type of situations to increase growing conditions for white oak in particular. But it's a fantastic tool for managing prairies, for managing pollinator plantings, for a lot of those different things that, especially if you're a small scale producer, you may not have a big tractor. You may have a small tractor, and you can even throw in some really good fire breaks with a walk behind tractor. But you need to get over, probably a little bit of hump as far as fear and making sure you're doing the right thing at the right time and as safe as possible. Stream team program, definitely shoot a picture of this one. I know that the farm I grew up on, Central Kentucky, would have been a hot spot for this type of activity. And it's basically kind of like he was talking about addressing, erosion there on site. This may go a little bit larger than that as far as maybe looking at whole swaths of stream as they move through your property and trying to stabilize those banks. There's a lot to that. I'm not even going to try to get into it. I don't know a lot about it myself. So I don't want to speak on behalf of their team. I just know they do some really awesome stuff around the Commonwealth. And it's free. That's awesome. Another big one that for folks that, may have looked at the department as more of kind of what we would consider maybe a hook and bullet type crowd, mainly fishermen, mainly, hunters. We also do a lot for non-game species as well. We have a whole non-game division, and within that division, we have a program called Kentucky Wild. That is a voluntary, that is an opportunity for folks like yourselves to maybe get involved in some of these projects that we're implementing out on the landscape. You can make a really solid contribution and not really have to put a whole lot in there and really advance some of the wildlife efforts that we got around the state. For folks who farm all summer long, what better way to get children out from underfoot than send them off to summer camp? That is something that we're really proud of and has introduced countless numbers of folks around the state to the outdoors, and hopefully help develop a sense of ethics regarding our natural resources. Our hunter education thing, obviously, if you're taking up this hunting is an activity, go through hunter education, make sure you're doing it safe. And then skill development. So say you are a farmer, you are a protein consumer, and you realize that you are seeing a significant amount of damage to some of your crops through deer. You're interested in maybe making sure that you utilize that meat the best way possible. Our Field to Fork program might be really line out with something that could be a benefit as far as your toolbox on your farm, and basically to teach you how to be able to go and safely, ethically harvest that animal and be able to put that into the freezer to meet some of your protein needs and reduce damage at the same time. Last but not least, I had to close it off with a picture of my bird dog because he's really cool. Here is my contact information. I serve as a regional coordinator. So I don't work specifically on a wildlife management area. I'm based out of Frankfurt. But if you still have questions that aren't answered here, or you're just shy, by all means, reach out to me. I will probably talk to you as much about farming as you talk to me about wildlife. And thank you.
Thanks, Jason. We appreciate that glimpse into the inner workings of Fish and Wildlife from kids camp all the way to the wetlands and stream perspective. So appreciate all that insight. And we'll broaden the perspective now back out to the national level with American Farmland Trust.
All right.
Dr. Mitch Hunter is the research director at American Farmland Trust, and he leads their Farms Under Threat research initiative and other efforts to protect U.S. farmland from development, mitigate climate change, and create thriving rural ecosystems. Mitch completed his PhD in agronomy with a minor in ecology at Penn State University. And we have a poll that we are going to share that Mitch has helped us to put together. So give us a sense of conservation practices specifically to enhance wildlife habitat on your farm or a farm you work with. Got some coming in there. And Mitch, while that's happening, you can start your screen share if that's appropriate.
Sounds good. Is that coming through, Jenny?
It is, yeah. You and the slides both.
What about the toolbar? Is that in the way?
I don't see it. Looks good.
Okay, great.
We've got about almost half of the group participating. So if you haven't answered that poll yet, please give us just a little more feedback.
I think I'll get started because I know we don't have a whole lot of time left in the session. So I just want to say hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Again, my name is Mitch Hunter. I am the research director at AFT, and I'm an agronomist by training, like Jenny said. Worked on organic cover cropping for my grad school projects. So this conference is near and dear to me. And I am based in St. Paul, Minnesota. And working kind of at a national scale. Just taking a look at the poll results, this is pretty interesting. The biggest group is no, not yet. So hopefully we can inspire folks to take that step to do some wildlife enhancements on their farms. A lot of people have done so independently. That's super cool. And a good number working with NRCS. I also hope that at the end of this talk, you'll have some ideas bouncing around in your head about how you might be able to do that with NRCS as well. So I have two titles for my talk. The first one is kind of the sober academic one, on-farm ecological restoration, linking farm scale creative conservation with country scale mapping. And I will get into that, but I thought there was also kind of a clickbait version that'd be kind of fun to share. So my second title is This One Weird Map Could Help Transform Farming and Save Biodiversity. So hopefully at the end of the day here, at the end of a long conference, that'll wake you all up and keep everybody engaged for the rest of this talk. Just briefly, I want to give an introduction to American Farmland Trust. Many of you might not know us too well. We're a leading national ag conservation organization, founded originally in 1980 to combat farmland loss due to poorly planned growth. And we actually were part of the group that helped create the conservation title of the Farm Bill back in 1985. That's the piece of legislation that gave us EQIP and CSP and all of the different programs that Matt talked about. We were also more recently, specifically very involved in creating the Ag Conservation Easement Program, Ag Land Easements, otherwise known as ACEP-ALE, which Matt mentioned, and that's tying back to our original founding mission to protect farmland from development. You might know us best from our bumper stickers, "No farms, no food." That is the AFT slogan. And just briefly, we take a holistic approach to agriculture. We think about the land, protecting it from development. We think about practices in terms of sustainable regenerative farming. And we think about the people, recognizing that we need to have people in agriculture to do the work, to constitute an ag community, to keep our whole system viable and moving forward. And recently, we've been doing a lot more in Kentucky around regenerative ag. We've got really cool projects going on, bringing back cereal rye as a crop, not only as a cover crop for environmental benefits, but also taking it to harvest the grain and feed that into the state's bourbon industry, which is a pretty cool economic development and sustainability strategy all rolled into one. We're getting involved with solar siting as people are seeing solar panels pop up on farmland across not only Kentucky, but across the country. We work with organic farmers as well as with conventional farmers, and there's a lot more to come from our Kentucky team. We did open an office in Louisville, Kentucky in July 2020, and the team there is rapidly growing. So I just want to invite you all to go visit them. The office is at the corner of Main and 7th Street, and they'd love to talk to anybody who wants to stop by. This is the one crazy map for my second title. And we've created this at AFT along with conservation science partners. This is part of a broader project called Farms Under Threat, which is a multi-year partnership with NRCS. Same organization that Matt works for, but we're partnering with the headquarters staff in the easement program division. And this map shows wildlife habitat connectivity, the pathways that animals can use to move across the landscape, basically. But with a special focus on agricultural land. So that's what makes this map really unique compared to other analyses of how wildlife might move. And in short, the yellow and red colors are high connectivity. That's where it's really easy for wildlife to move across the landscape. Blue and black are low connectivity. And I won't go into the technical detail, but I want to talk about how this map can help us implement conservation practices that protect and restore biodiversity. And to do that, I want to tell you the story of one particular organic farm, because I think it illustrates a journey that might resonate with many of you, linking organic farming, a personal conservation ethic, partnering with NRCS, and also uniquely partnering with a private land trust. And overall, I hope that between the map and this story, we can help kind of realize the potential here, which is to transform agriculture in a way that protects biodiversity. So to tell the story, I'm going to start zooming into Southeast Minnesota. To orient you a little bit, here's part of the Mississippi River, the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin. I'll zoom in a little bit closer to this one part of Wabasha County. Might look different than you expect. Probably think about Minnesota as flat prairie. This part of the state is actually a little bit more like Kentucky, some rolling hills, bluff lands. It's kind of the area where the land starts to break off down towards the Mississippi River. And the map on the left and the really colorful map on the right are showing the same landscape, the same part, basically they're covering the same area. So to give you a better sense of how this connectivity map works, you can see that the highest connectivity, these really bright reds and yellows, correspond down here to this wildlife management area, natural area. And then they snake up here and follow some water courses, follow the forested blufflands where you still have pretty high connectivity. On the other hand, you have low connectivity in these dark areas, and that corresponds to the big open crop fields where there's just less cover that's helping animals move across the landscape. And I'm going to focus on this one little pocket in the landscape that I'm highlighting here in yellow. It's right in a space where the connectivity, as you can see, this blue isn't super high, which is based on the fact that it's mostly farmland. But the potential of this one piece of land is high because it's right in this pocket here where there's high connectivity around it, and it can actually help connect this landscape more completely. Now, I'm especially interested in this one little pocket because it happens to be my parents' farm. Here they are. They're actually on this meeting today, so they might be blushing right now. This is them walking through one of the woodlots on the farm. They bought the farm in 2010, and as you can see, when you compare this 2009 aerial photograph to 2015, they rapidly converted the old contour strips of corn and alfalfa over into permanent pastures. And this was done with an NRCS EQIP contract that paid for fencing, paid for water lines to make it possible to do this conversion. And then it was followed up a few years later with a CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program contract, that enabled them to enhance the pasture management, enhance wildlife benefits, add some pollinator habitat, and that sort of thing. And as they made this transition, they started producing grass-fed beef. This is real 100% grass-fed beef. These cattle are outside all year round, even way up here in Minnesota where it was 13 below yesterday morning. They don't mind it. And this big shift to pastures was also a massive change ecologically. And we started to see transformations on the landscape pretty early on. It was only a couple of years after making these changes that bobolinks moved in. Bobolinks are a species of concern, a grassland bird. They're in decline nationally. And what's interesting is that the neighbor, our neighbor at the farm who grew up on this farm, had never seen them before in his entire life living there. But now we have tons of bobolinks. And my dad has seen 30 males that have this cool, unique hooded characteristic lined up on the electric fence in late summer when they're all getting ready to migrate down to Argentina. And so what changed? Well, the bobolinks apparently did not like the previous management, even though it was good conservation. Contour strips, dealing with the slope, included perennials. And after all, this area is not far from Coon Valley, Wisconsin, which is where the Soil Conservation Service really got its start. So conservation is deeply ingrained, but it turns out that bobolinks don't like edges on the landscape. So all those strips turn them off, and then apparently the pastures turned them on because they really came in a big way. But that was just the beginning of the transformation of this farm. An opportunity came up to deepen the conservation that we were doing. And that was with a group called the Minnesota Land Trust. They generally focus on natural areas, but a few years ago, they started a thing called the Bluff Lands Protection Program. It's a really unique program. The basic parameters are that they put easements on private land, which means that the land stays in private hands. My parents still own their farm, but it can never be developed or really degraded away from the state that it's held in now. This was possible because of funding from a sales tax surcharge that passed in Minnesota a number of years back that provided the funding. And this program is focused on the blufflands or the driftless region down here in the southeast Minnesota. It's the most biodiverse region of the state. It's part of a critical flyway. It has a lot of trout streams, as well as a number of threatened and endangered species, timber rattlesnake, northern long-eared bat, red-shouldered hawk, the bobolink that I mentioned, and some more rare woodpeckers as well. So that's what caused them to focus on this region. And this program was really very serendipitous for our farm. I have to say, because Matt was really doing a good job of setting up my talk, that I think I was unclear when we were chatting before. This easement was actually not done through the NRCS easement program. It was all done through the Minnesota Land Trust. So it's pretty unique to have a land trust that's focused on natural resources, not typically on farmland, to work with a farmer to do a permanent easement. But it was important for us to have this happen because our farm is not close to big cities. There's not a lot of development pressure. So it kind of breaks the mold of traditional ag conservation easements, which are typically done to protect a farm that otherwise is going to get developed and turned into strip malls and subdivisions and the like. And to do that, they figure out the value of the easement based on the development value. What are you giving up by saying, hey, we're not going to sell this for houses, we're going to keep it as a farm? And this approach is great. I mean, it's been AFT's focus for over 40 years. It's had a lot of successes. There's actually a really important program in the Lexington, Kentucky area that was previously led by one of AFT's senior staffers. So it does so much good, but this traditional model is not as relevant when you're far away from cities where the development value of a farm is limited. So what they did in this case was to pay for the value of this farm being in permanent pasture forever, or being able to sell it to the next farmer, and that person could go in and plow up the pastures and go back to cropping, which would have bad effects for the soil erosion, for wildlife as well. So the way it worked is essentially there's the original value of the farm where you could do anything with it. You could farm it however you wanted. And then it was reappraised at what's the pasture value? What's the value of this farm if you can only use it for pasture production? And the difference, basically the value of the cropping opportunity, became the value of the easement. So that's how this was able to move forward. And it's a new model that I think can expand the use of ag easements. So why did they choose this farm? Well, some cool, unique conservation values. There is that connectivity that I mentioned before. There's a number of protected areas nearby and some cool ecological features, including this one we call the desert. I'm seeing myself running out of time in this session. So unless I get a different word from Jenny, I'm going to try to speed things up and finish up here quick. But suffice to say, there's some cool rare plants. Going beyond that, there's also a plan to restore savanna on this farm. Oak savanna is a very endangered ecosystem, has a lot of ecological benefits, and it also creates the opportunity to have both production value in terms of grazing and conservation value at the same time, because you're restoring a unique ecosystem. And this was the dream, but at the time, all we had was pasture that butted up against the graded woods. And we started working with NRCS, had a lot of good conversations, but couldn't quite make it fit, mostly because there was kind of this disconnect between practices for the pastures and practices for the forests. But creating silvopasture out of woods, creating savanna out of woods, like fell into a crack between the existing programs. So my dad started working on this kind of on his own with a little help from the local Soil and Water Conservation District, very small acreage. So this area here went from being pasture and degraded woods to much more open, some large oaks and butternuts were released. A lot of weedy trees were taken out. It expanded the grazing lands. It opened up a cool, beautiful birch parkland area, and the grasses started to come back really rapidly. And now we're working towards the point where we can burn this on a regular basis, burn it and graze it and have that be the management regime. In the meantime, my dad had a breakthrough with NRCS, and they basically figured out how to bridge this divide so that we can first work on the forested lands, restore those, and then turn around and implement grazing practices to make it a true oak savanna that can be managed with both grazing and fire. I'm cutting some of the details out of that story, which are pretty interesting, but for time, if you're interested in how did we have this breakthrough, maybe we can touch on that in the Q&A. The bottom line is that it took creativity, it took persistence. Ultimately, it worked. I'm going to skip our video, but the good news is that the big savanna restoration is getting started. And I think that's a pretty cool, compelling story of creative ecological restoration on a working farm. So how does this relate back to our crazy maps? Well, I hope that these maps can start to spread this kind of work around the country. You can use the map to identify areas with high restoration potential, focus our efforts where they can have the greatest impact. I encourage you to work creatively with Matt and others at NRCS, with Jason. It seems like they have really cool resources too, but also find out about private land trusts that might be interested in partnering with you to to really transform your farm so you can protect biodiversity. I noticed one cool thing, which is this ring of potential connectivity around Lexington, following the Kentucky River. Maybe that's an opportunity. There's lots of farms in that ring. Could be a really awesome opportunity in a place where there is development pressure. Speaking of which, we have another report coming out soon that's going to really be zeroing in on development pressure. I don't have time to give you the story right now. I'm just going to say thank you, and I'm love to have any questions in the Q&A.
Mitch, we appreciate that. That's inspiring. And for your parents who are on the call, thank you for offering Mitch that inspirational bit of presentation to give and really pull all the pieces together in that presentation. We appreciate so much Mitch, Jason, and Matt for sharing these resources with us tonight. And I know many of you have gotten used to the slides that we usually share at this point before question and answer, and we are going to skip those. So I'm going to follow Mitch's lead and go right into the Q&A. I will touch on the housekeeping that we will get started tomorrow morning at 10:45 Eastern Time with a farmer hack session, another group of farmers sharing with us some innovation from their farm in video form. And that'll be followed up by our keynote, Jennifer Taylor. And all of the sessions tomorrow you won't want to miss. So check that out in the agenda. Join us and we'll see you in the morning. But for now, we've got just a few questions. I know that we are just past time, so watch the recording if you have to leave right now and clock out. But for now, we're gonna bounce back up to NRCS specific questions with Matt. Of course, the technical and financial assistance programs always ring bells when it comes to this audience, which is why you're here, and we continue to offer those great programs, specifically with receiving assistance from NRCS. Do you have to have a farm number associated with your farm from your local FSA office?
Yes, you do. So I saw some chats that folks said, you know, if they don't own a farm, can they participate? And yes, you do have to control some part of a farm that has a farm and tract number with Farm Service Agency, but you don't have to be the owner. You just have to control. And that means maybe you've leased part of a farm. Maybe you've, and it doesn't have to be a whole farm. If there's woodland or pasture land or whatever the case might be, if you just have control of one piece of it, some parts of tracts or things, we can work with you on this.
Great. And sticking with the NRCS funding opportunities and specifically for EQIP and CSP funding, how do you most easily, other than reading the Oak newsletter that comes out in your email every month, how do you most easily find out about those deadlines?
Right, so my answer is always going to be contact your local Natural Resources Conservation Service office. Those offices can be found nrcs.usda.gov. You can navigate to the to your state's website. You can navigate to the Find a Service Center section. So you can always contact your local service center. You can always look on your state's NRCS website at the newsroom, and there'll be there'll always be announcements of program opportunities in the newsroom section. So those, I think, are two really good options. Probably the best is contact your local NRCS office because you'll get personalized assistance that way.
I would second that answer from experiences I have had and know about. Talk to the people. It's better than the website. The website will teach you a lot, but the people are going to be where the connections really are made.
Definitely.
Looking at fish and wildlife, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Jason, but I also prepped you for this, so I hope you're ready. As far as you mentioned a lot of programs that farmers and landowners could potentially tap into and gave us great resources to access those. Could you share with us a specific farmer or farm-based story where you have seen some of those Kentucky Fish and Wildlife resource opportunities play out with a private lands biologist or something else?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's a lot to pull from. Working with producers over the years, a lot of those do tie in with that cooperation with NRCS and the department. And really, I think some of the most impactful habitats that I've seen in my particular area of the state, the Bluegrass region, has been utilizing those odd spaces around the edges of fields to really increase diversity. Creating those smooth transition points between forest to field is really awesome. And then I know that if you talk to a fish and wildlife person, you're going to hear this all the time, and it's native plants, native grasses. We had a really robust grazing system here in the state of Kentucky long before we ever set foot here. And I think that utilizing a lot of those plants still in our grazing regimes not only is going to put weight on our cows, make our livestock happy, but I mean, that's what our native flora and fauna know and love. And that's probably, I think, around some of those big, like you said, CSP equip type of initiatives where I've seen probably the biggest impact.
And Mitch, I haven't seen anything pop up in the chat specific for you. You were so comprehensive, nobody had any questions. And the one I had for you, you pretty well answered as well, which really was kind of something that you could speak to, or we could kind of wrap up with responses from any of the three of you who would like to. But just really in sharing the story of your parents' land, Mitch, it really offered a perspective of ways that the landowners can look at their land as part of a larger ecosystem and see, the examples of the bobolink, like that. Those animals are there, and the waterways are there, and how are we impacting them by the practices we choose? So I guess if you want to elaborate on that more than you already have, or if anybody else wants to add on to that.
Well, I probably don't have to tell this crowd that message too loudly. I think most people who are excited about organic farming are seeing farming in the big picture. And that's an awesome part about this community. But I do think it can be helpful to kind of open up what are those possibilities. If you don't have a pile of money to burn to do this on your own, which most farmers don't, you need partners. And so I think that's where it comes down to reaching out to, a wide range. And I think I probably only mentioned half of the people who were really involved with my parents, because it also included, folks from the Wild Turkey Federation and myriad different local soil and water conservation district. And from what I've seen from that experience, like there's a lot of really smart, knowledgeable people out there who really want to do this work, and they're looking for landowners to partner with. So, I think you maybe just start the ball rolling, and it can pick up a lot of momentum once you find the right people in your local area who are excited. There's some resources, and you can make a lot happen. So I guess I'll just encourage people to act on that ethic that I know you all have. And then it's super rewarding to see the results and all the diversity and wildlife that comes to your farm. So I'll leave it at that.
Matt or Jason, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I have my little notes over here of things that I wish that I would have said my given time that I totally forgot about. The first is that earlier today, the gentleman from Berea who I've met and talked about cool native plants before, I can't remember the guy's name, he's awesome. Anyways, he had a slide that he had a KDFWR drill in. We do have access to Truax drills, which are fantastic tools. I mean, if you're planting $500 an acre level type seeds, you want to make sure that you're planting them with a very good tool, and we have access to that very expensive tool that is for you all. We also have some really exciting grazing research that we're conducting at Bluegrass Army Depot, utilizing native grasses and patch burn grazing, which is really probably very similar to how some of these early systems were managed. Look to see more of that coming out available. I'm just really pumped. Maybe you all invite me back to share some of that at a future conference for your grazing folks. And then Tamara Slush, she called me out for not saying riparian buffer as being one of the most important things you could do. It definitely is. And forest management. So thank you all so much.
All right, Matt, any final words? Or?
I just wanted to thank everyone for listening to me today. I appreciate that. You know, our agency is technical assistance and conservation plans are the bread and butter of our agency. Now, everybody wants to get that financial assistance, and we're grateful that we can offer that and partner with folks to receive that. But I just want to encourage everyone, first step, get that conservation plan. That's our very first step. With that plan, we can help you determine what kind of financial assistance programs might be right for you, what fits there would be. We can help point you in all the different little accounts where there's money for these activities and then money for these other activities. And without a conservation plan, that's really hard to help you to navigate those different programs. So please, I just really encourage everyone, you have any kind of agricultural operation at all, come in, let us help you. We'll show you a lot of different ways that you can improve your operation with respect to wildlife and erosion and just all the different aspects, and can point you to some of those easement programs with partners like Mitch. So really appreciate the opportunity that you've given us today to share that.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you, all three of you, and your organizations and the work you're doing. Thank you for the synergy that you've shown in your collective work and in the broader picture of we all need to be working together in this work. So I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who's stuck with us to the very end. And we hope to see you back tomorrow morning at 10:45 Eastern time. Have a great night. Stay warm, everybody.